Welcome to another episode of Breaking the Silence. I'm your host, Damian Bloss. And today I'm joined by Wendy Beck, a powerful advocate for addiction recovery, sober living, community outreach, and also the founder of Rage Against Addiction. So, welcome, Wendy. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you. No problem. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely, so am I. So yeah, let's go ahead and we'll jump right into it. And I know that you've poured so much of yourself into the work that you do, and I think understanding the roots of that passion is so important. So basically, let me start at the beginning. What inspired you to create Rage Against Addiction?
Um, it was something that just kind of came to me. I had a family member that was struggling with addiction, and in my I guess loss in knowing what to do, I just kind of decided to do something for myself because I wasn't able to help her, my daughter. So I just decided to start a nonprofit organization. I had absolutely no idea what that meant at the time. I just started, from the very beginning with figuring out what I needed to do to start a nonprofit, doing the research, getting the checklists, filling out the paperwork, submitting it. And then along that journey, I learned, what our mission was going to be because I wanted to have safety nets where I felt like there wasn't any resources for her when she was struggling. So that was kind of how I started it. Yeah, so the mission, you kept it broad so you could kind of fill in the blanks as you go. And it was to provide awareness and support to anyone that struggled with drug and or alcohol abuse, including the families, because I was the family.
Definitely, I totally get that, and you know, when you talk about that, it's so powerful, because you were saying how it's with your daughter and stuff, and I know we never truly get over grief, and we just tend to live with it and stuff, and I think it's incredible, that you're honoring her memory by helping others, and taking it that step further. And I really, really admire the strength it took, and I'm sure it still takes, to continue down that journey.
Well,
So,
it
like,
does. Yeah, it does.
yeah,
It does.
yeah,
It's a daily conscious effort. But now, I mean, not to interrupt you, but
no,
it's become more like it started out as like finding a purpose to the pain. And
mm,
then it evolved into a business because a nonprofit is a business. And now we serve a lot of people. So now has become my purpose as well.
yeah, awesome. That's so incredible. I really do love your story. And everything that you and your team does, it's just, I completely admire that. And once that inspiration hit, or what have you, like how did you take that idea and pretty much turn it into a real organization the way you have?
It didn't start really as an idea. It started as anger. I'm not gonna
Mm,
lie.
hmm.
That's the name, Rage Against Addiction. I have this funny, it's not a funny story, but it's kind of like the story that how I got the name. And my daughter was struggling. She was young. This was, gosh, probably back in like 2013, I guess, when she was struggling and she had um friends and a boyfriend and they were all kind of struggling. It was like this secret kind of like underworld that was happening like right under my nose. Like I couldn't figure out what was happening.
Right.
You think that your kids just kind of go through that natural, progression of experimenting. It's like a rite of passage for them to like experiment with marijuana or alcohol, and you kind of like brace yourself for that. Um, and it really wasn't that happened. It was kind of like all of a sudden it was like from 0 to 60. She was fine. And then there was this person that I didn't know anymore. And at the time, because I didn't really know anything about addiction like I do now, I had never
Right.
experienced it. I was like a mom who was very close to her daughter. And when she changed, I couldn't figure it out and I became angry. So I remember one time her friend, he was sitting at the kitchen counter with me and she was upstairs getting ready. And I was kind of like trying to like, you know, get to the bottom of like what is happening. Like I had no idea of the vastness of the drug abuse that was happening in her friend group and in the community. And I was just so distraught. And I remember saying to him, because she was upstairs getting ready, they were going to go somewhere. And I said to him, I said, do you know what I'm addicted to? And his like eyes like popped open because he just like thought I was like telling him like this major secret that I was like doing something that was, I don't know, in line with whatever was happening like with this community of teenagers. And he said, no. And I said, I am addicted to you guys. Because that's when
Mm.
I had realized that I was so codependent on what was happening that I wasn't even living my own life. Like I just felt like I was chasing, this ghost that I had no idea what was happening. And so I was so angry. I just said, I'm just going to rage against addiction at this point.
Wow.
And that's how the name evolved. I didn't like really like write it down 50 times and change it. I was just like, I'm just going to rage against addiction. And that's kind of what I did from that point. I started, like I said, filling out the paperwork and just moving through the motions. And as her addiction progressed, I kept seeing where the system was failing her. I mean, she could take the choice at any time to change her life, but the younger you are when you start it, the harder it is because of the way that your brain is, not developing because of the drug use. It was
Right.
harder for her. It was like just from the minute she started using, it was just like 100%, off the tracks. And so I started doing things for the organization, figuring out what the mission was going to be, like I said. And as she was started to go through the system, because I always say this, I said, I didn't experience my daughter going to prom and graduating. We had drug court and, central booking. And so
Right.
it was really tough. And so, as she went through that process of trying to get help or, the system helping her, we had what was I going to say? I'm sorry. I kind of lost my train of thought. No, it just, we experienced sober living and it was terrible. I mean,
Mm.
I know at the time that was someone was trying to help because they just were, but the resources weren't there, the living conditions weren't there. So that was like the first thing on my checklist that I would really wanted to change. And
Right.
so as you start fundraising and start, saving and doing that kind of stuff, that was really my ultimate goal. And then I found a program director who was a friend, Rachel, and she was kind of on board as well. So that was kind of how we kind of fell into the sober living for women space.
Nice. That's so awesome. Like, and I like the way you talk about how, you were basically not living your life and, coming from me who was in active addiction and I never got that. I never understood that. And like people would say, my mom and my parents, and Alicia even, they would say after I got sober, I wasn't able to live and I started to finally realize like addiction doesn't just affect me and it doesn't just affect the one who is addicted. And I think that gets lost kind of in translation, especially for the addict. Like we just think that it's only being done to ourselves. Why are you so upset? That kind of thing.
Right.
So
No,
I I,
I
I
agree.
think it's very important that you bring that up because it is so important. It does affect everyone involved, family, friends, colleagues, whatever, anybody that we come in contact with, it affects everyone. So I'm glad you brought that up because it's very, very important. And I
Well, you
think,
live in a state of worry. So
yeah,
what they're doing, you see is hurting them. And so
mm,
it creates, pain within you and you can't stop it. You can't change it. So you find yourself, being, sorry, computer makes that noise.
oh, you're
This
good.
state of worry all the time. So when you're living in the
Mm,
state of worry, you can't be present. You're not present with your other family members, your job. You're just kind of I used to you know, be so consumed with her that it was so unhealthy, but it was the only way that I felt like I could stay connected.
mm, yeah,
Like
yeah,
I was gonna, if I didn't worry about it, something terrible was gonna happen, but obviously something terrible happened anyway.
yeah,
So yeah, we can't control that as much as we would want to. I used to think if I could, just she could give it to me, I would figure out how to heal her and then I could give it back. You know what I mean? Like, okay, this is
yeah,
how you do it. All these crazy things go through your mind. Well, what if
mm,
I use drugs and I, figured out how to help her recover? Obviously that's just crazy. But, you kind of go through that because what I've learned in my experience on this journey, it's been over 10 years and it's basically gosh, they, meaning the person, and you can probably relate to this, that struggles isn't going to listen to someone who hasn't. And that's
mm,
why that peer-to-peer um I guess coaching or just sponsorship is really important because you're not going to want to take advice from someone. You are not even going to want to take business advice from a person who doesn't have a business. So why are you
yeah.
going to take recovery advice from someone who has never recovered? And so as much as I tried, like I couldn't relate. I couldn't relate to what was happening.
Yeah, very powerful stuff because you're absolutely right. Like I'm not gonna, people used to tell me all the time, um, you know, just stop. Why can't you just stop? Why can't you do this? And like I'm not gonna listen to them. They're not in my position. So yeah, I totally get that. And I never thought about it that way, but it's 100% right. Yeah. So
And
so
that's why,
wow.
yeah, and that's why it was so important for the organization that I had someone who was in early recovery at the time to help, kind of get us up and running with the houses because as much as I wanted to be able to do it and like I can do the business side, I can pay the bills, I can do the fundraising, but you needed that level of connection with the ladies. So we ultimately, we did open our sober living house and it's been 2018 is when we started the first house and it's a testament to the program director of how our program works because you need to have that peer-to-peer communication where I just don't think like the average person can go out and run something as smoothly as we have been able to do because of that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. That's super helpful, and it kind of leads me into the next thing I wanted to talk about. We were talking about families and everything like that. You know, so they families can play, and they do play a vital part of recovery. Sometimes they unintentionally, though, they enable harmful patterns. In your in Rage Against Addiction, how do you help families like recognize the difference? Because there is a fine line between support and enabling. How do you help families recognize the difference between support and enabling?
I think early on for me, I mean, I was a huge enabler. Not
Mm,
only was I chasing her, I was, providing things that, she should have been able to provide for herself as she got older. So, just giving money or giving rides or making excuses, like all of that kind of stuff, the family member just they unintentionally enable because they're trying to in some way protect, again, keeping their hands in the pot. And I
Mm.
have to say that I have a friend. I had a friend at the time when my daughter was struggling so much, and she saw all this pain that I was going through and chasing and worrying and just, living. I was a hot mess. I mean, I was so stressed out. My hair was falling out. I would cry my whole way to work. Like I just didn't really know what to do. And ultimately, it really is their decision whether or not to get clean and sober. And no one really, I mean, you can guide them, you can plant the seeds. Even today, we have women that come into our houses. Some of them have been there for over a year, and we have other ones that come in the door, wake up the next morning and say, "No, I don't want to be here. I'm not ready for this." But my friend, I remember her very, very distinctively saying to me, she said, "Wendy, if you don't get out of the way, God cannot step in."
Ooh,
And I was just kind of like, whoa, like it
yeah.
just was really powerful to me because, whether it was God or the universe or whatever powers, you believe in, your higher power, at that point, I was kind of like trying to manage the situation, and I wasn't allowing the natural consequences to take their role. And that was hard as a parent.
Oh,
I mean, it's hard to have a loved one watch them go down a path where now they're in jail. Now they're whatever, all of it. So
right.
yeah, so that was really a moment for me where, and it's hard to say no when you love someone. It's hard to put up those boundaries. And I had to learn that there are definitely support groups like Al-Anon and you know lots of other kinds of things for families. With rage, we are more, I guess, have a grief group, and we have
Mm.
that online, and then we have our sober living. So we kind of we're kind of a resource broker in a lot of ways. Where when people will reach out and they'll say, I don't know what to do, my family, we'll recommend these tried and true, organizations that are doing that. That's not something that we necessarily have our hands in, but we would definitely recommend those types of support systems for the family because they need it. They really
Mm.
do. It's
Yeah.
hard to disengage when you love someone, and it's just not getting better.
Right. Oh, yeah.
It's just not.
Definitely. Yeah. No, not at all. And I think that's awesome too that, you even though you don't technically, provide support, you have avenues that they can take so you can point them in the right direction. And I think that's just as important as doing it because, you know, we're not all going to be able to do everything for everyone, and so
Exactly.
I think that's super important that, even though you can't, you can still at least say, hey, go here, and they'll be able to provide better help or, the right help for you. So,
And
yeah, that's,
during that time, I mean, I was learning, how to cope myself. So like you said, we can't help everybody, but we can definitely point them in the right direction. And we do that. And I feel like the recovery and the addiction support community is very good at
mm,
partnering and collaborating with each other to just kind of, like you said, you have to pick your one thing. Like not everyone can do everything. So our one thing ended up being sober living, and we have another small program that we do as well. But yeah, I'd rather send someone to a place where they can get the resources that they need.
yeah, absolutely. And, because families, it is such an important point, with families and things. And it really connects to, it can connect to a bigger issue as well. Like there's still so much stigma around addiction, you know, judgments and things. And, we don't want to go outside of ourselves and ask for help and things. And it really does keep a lot of people from getting the help they need. I struggle with that too, and I know so many others do as well. You know, what do you think, as in your opinion, what do you think that we can do as a society to kind of change the way we think and talk about addiction? Any insight on that?
I think it's gotten better. I feel
Hmm.
like, there has been a big light that was shining on it back in, I guess, like the early, I guess around 2013, around the time when I noticed my daughter struggling. There was this like kind of huge light that was shining on the overdoses that were happening in the area and in the country for that matter. So there was some national attention. They kind of people were saying, okay, we kind of need to do something about this. And we started educating ourselves. And by educating ourselves, you have an understanding, which I truly do believe it is a disease, 100%. It's a disease of the brain. And so we need to treat it that way. And there is evidence-based programming that helps people, just like therapy would help someone, with a mental health issue and so on. So I think, first of all, education. I think people are scared of addiction. It's like taboo, not in my family, not in my backyard, like that type of thing. So if it hasn't directly affected you, they put up I don't want to deal with this. I don't understand it. This is not, this is for people who are poor. This is for people who are uneducated. This is for people who are losers, whatever. But I think we're realizing that that's not true, at all. And the stigma has changed somewhat, but you're always going to have those people who are just not, going to understand it unless they've gone through it.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And, you know, I agree too that it has come a long way and it's coming a long way slowly, but it is getting better and, people are starting to talk about it more. But yeah, I think we're always going to have that where we feel that like you said, you're there's such a stereotype of the way an addict looks, or someone going through a mental health crisis as well. Like you always hear, well, he didn't look like, or she didn't look like, fill in the
The
blank. She didn't
typical,
look,
right.
yeah.
The
So,
homeless person on the street. And there was also during this time, I remember seeing this post. It was on Facebook, and this was a long time ago before social media had evolved to what it is today. And it was this big giant house, beautiful house. And it said, not every addict is homeless, and it can be in
mm,
your own neighborhood. And it was so true because I mean, we weren't, super affluent, but we were middle class. She went to school every day. We had a, you know, normal, sat down and had dinner, kind of family. And for this to happen, it wasn't about us not being good people. And it wasn't even about her making bad choices, because you just don't know who is going to end up becoming addicted. And
yeah,
there's could be the same, there's some kids that were in the same circle with her that today have families and you know have overcame it. She was an instant addict. And I say that, and I believe that wholeheartedly, because from the time it started, it never stopped. And it was just the timing, the development of her brain, where she was, and it just got to a point where it was unreversible, and she passed away as a result of it.
yeah. And I know it happened, in 2013, and I'm still sorry for your loss, because it's something that nobody ever wants to experience, or do we ever think it's going to happen? It kind of goes back to that, is it going to happen? It's not going to happen to us kind of thing. And it's like, when it does, it's so hurtful. And, I feel so much, you know, compassion for you. And, because I've never experienced that. But it can happen. And that is also my worst fear, because of what I've gone through, my kids growing up and not growing up, and not being able to. So it's a definite fear. And I appreciate your vulnerability on that.
No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've talked about it a lot over the years, so I'm able to, but it doesn't really make
Yeah.
it feel any easier. Her birthday was on Thursday, a couple days ago, and you don't realize like those little triggers that, kind of puts shine a light on like all of the things that you missed and all of the things that are never going to happen because, of the path that she took. And, as a family, we went down that road together, and it's very isolating. It's very
Yeah.
isolating having someone in your family that struggles because, you almost, I mean, you're in a state of worry, but you're almost in a state where you feel like you want to protect them. And in your time of like trying to cover up for them or making excuses for them or protecting them, you become very alone. And I
Mm.
feel like that's one thing that a lot of families, struggle with, is like they just feel so isolated because they don't realize that, they feel like they're the only people who are going through this and other people just won't understand.
Yeah, yeah, and I get that 100, excuse me, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Same with, we always feel like we're the only ones going through it. Even if there are others that we know, we just don't want to bother them with, our struggles. And, I think that can hurt as well, trying to get the help that we actually need, because we always think that we're hurting someone or not hurting someone, but wasting their time basically. And, they don't have time to hear me, or, you know, I don't want to bother them.
Right. Well, and like I said before, it's very all consuming. So you don't really think about anything else because it's what you're going through at the time. You're living in a state of worry, you become codependent, you're isolating yourself, all because of the behaviors of someone else that you can't change. And
Right.
it becomes very lonely for the
Mm.
family. And finding the correct resources, like we talked about earlier, isn't always that easy. But
Yeah.
it's getting better. It's getting better for the families. I know that. But if you do know someone that's struggling, and as a family member, and there are resources, I've talked to many people just to sometimes just listen and give like
Mm.
little tiny, set boundaries, or, it used to be the tough love.
Right.
And then it was kind of shifted to kind of, love them where they're at. So we kind of went through, tough love, like kick them out, do all of this stuff. And then it was like, love them where they're at. But then you have families that are like, okay, well, they're using in my home. I can't kick them out. But then if I let them use because I love them and I don't want them out on the street, they could die
Mm.
anyway. So there's no right answer.
Right.
It's very complicated.
It definitely is. It's a catch 22 if you think about it that way.
Hmm.
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't, kind of
Pretty
thing.
much, yes.
Um,
And
so
disengaging isn't an option because this is your child. This
yeah.
is your husband. This is the person, you have to kind of get to a point, which could take a very long time, getting to that
Mm.
point where you're like, okay, I can't, I can't change this. They're not going to change it. So what am I going to do? And if it's a relationship that's not someone that is a child, well, and I say child because when you have a 14, 15, 16, 17-year old, you do feel responsible for them. But when it's a spouse or someone that you're in a relationship with, you kind of have to make decisions at some point. Okay, if this behavior is not going to stop, what do I need to do that's good for me? And that's a really hard place to be.
Right, because they don't have to be there. Like with your child or a loved one, mainly a child though, you're basically, that is your life, right? Where a spouse is like, you know, you don't have to be there. You choose to be there, and if you have to make that choice, whether it's hard or not, to stick by them or not, or figure out what's best for you. And uh, that's the. I remember Alicia telling me that was the place that she was in. She didn't have to be
Sure.
there, but she chose.
Right.
And it's like, that takes strength as well.
Yeah, it does. Well, because it's hard to watch someone destroy themselves. It
Yeah.
honestly is. Yeah, it's not a fun place to be. Thankfully, you guys, are an amazing couple because you got through this, that time in your life and you came out on the other side, which doesn't always happen. Yeah,
Right.
I was married and there was alcoholism involved at the same time that my daughter was struggling with a drug addiction. And at that point, I had to pick like who I can't you know, and maybe I didn't have to pick, but for my sanity, I chose my child over the relationship. And, he's in recovery today. We're not married, but she passed away. So you just don't know how it's
Gee,
all going to end up,
right,
honestly.
right, exactly. Wow. You
Yeah,
know,
that
and
was that was a hard time. That
I,
was a lot. That really was a lot. And I had a baby. So,
oh man,
yeah, it was like juggling all these things, including a full-time job and then getting the organization off the ground. But it really, I mean, I hate to say that it worked out because she did
yeah,
pass away, but I know that there's so many people that have been helped because of the struggles that she went through. So it makes it, as unfortunately it wasn't worth it, but it makes it easier.
yeah, exactly. And I think it was beautifully said. It doesn't make it easy, but or worth it, but it kind of, because her memory is living on to help others. It's kind of like you're helping her in a way as well, and everything like it just come full circle in a sense, not, but yeah, I just think it's so awesome that you can turn such a tragic moment into something that benefits so many other people, who are going through the same thing. And it really shows how much how much that we needed as a community, as a society. And you know so taking me into the next thing, like, you said you have multiple recovery houses,
Mhm.
and how, speaking on that, how does someone like get into one of your recovery houses? Like, how does that work? Are they referred by a treatment center? Can they reach out on their own?
Yeah, all of the above, honestly. So, we've been around, like I said, for some time, and there's not that many recovery houses in the community. I mean, there are recovery houses. There's for men, there for women, and there's some women and children's. Not a lot of them, but there's a few. So it's like supply and demand. There's
Mm,
not that many, and it's not the right fit for everyone. But what typically happens is that when someone goes to treatment, they will find out like what their next steps are going to be, and they work with their case manager. And if sober living is an option for them, they will reach out to us. And our program director will do a screening, is what we call it, just to see if they're the right fit. So um, just questions about just them in general. If we have a bed, we'll set up a date for them to come when treatment's over, and it's usually bed to bed. So they'll come straight to us from there. But that's not the only way. I mean, people can just reach out. Sometimes you've had people that are living with their home in their homes with their families, and they're like, this is just not the best place for me to be. It's too triggering. Do you guys have a bed? And if we do, that works too. But once they come in, they work a program, and the program that
mm,
they work is the program is the Daughter's House program. So they come in, they have a blackout period, which is typically 30 days. And in the first 30 days, we kind of set up this program where, it's a good time to, like, get to know yourself again, get to know your network. Just for the first time in a really long time, you're sitting with yourself and you haven't even felt your emotions in a really long time. So the first 30
mm,
days are really, really important. And then during that time, you're looking for a job. I mean, if you have a job, you can go back to it. But you're not allowed to kind of venture out by yourself. It's called blackout for a reason. You kind of have to like kind of like just kind of regroup a little bit. And then after the blackout period and you're working, you're free to pretty much go about your day. You know, you go to work, you go to a meeting, there is a curfew, they have to do chores every day. So it's, you know, it's a bunch of people living in a house together. So to keep it structured, they have to make sure that everything is clean. They have chores they have to check off. They have to get a sponsor. We have a weekly house meeting that every is mandatory. Everyone must attend. And that's kind of like a time for everyone to come together and say, hey, you know, this person's not doing this chore right, or just to kind of come together. And sometimes it's positive, and sometimes it's like, hey, we need to do better as a household, just like any family would. You know, I
Right.
wish that we could have a house meeting at my house on Sundays and be like, you weren't doing your chore, you know, but it becomes they become a family in a
Yeah.
sense. And you know, there are people who are coming and going, and I can imagine it would be tough living with 7 or 8 women. But they do it and they become friends sometimes, and they create a network for themselves. And in that, finding a sponsor, going to meetings, having a home group, it all teaches them that there are people out there to support them. Because if you just come out of treatment, or you've been struggling and you just go back home and you just go back into your old habits, you're not really changing. So you
Right.
have to kind of do that. They also are required to do step work. So we have step work, sponsor, home group, house meetings, and then they have to work, and then they have to follow the house rules. It's not that hard. It's kind of like basic life stuff. But a lot
Yeah.
of times when you're in a situation where you've been using drugs or alcohol for a long time, just getting up and going to work is hard, and you're not thinking about doing chores and that kind of stuff. And then once they get a lot of that stuff under their belt, there's the opportunity to reunite with their families, which we see a lot of that as well. I mean, and that could take time too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. There's no time frame that you can put on, when like people used to ask me like when did you start doing this again? When did you, and I want to be able to do it within that same time, and I'm like, everybody recovers at different times. There's no time frame that you can put on this thing. Just take your time, be patient with it. It will happen when it's supposed to happen, kind of thing. And I think it's important that you just said that too, because there's really, you can't say in 31 days you'll be able to, be perfectly fine and reunite with your family, and everything's going to be hunky dory. It could be 32 days, or it could be 6 months from now. So
Or
I
a
think it,
year. You know, I
yeah.
think that we underestimate what we can do. What is the saying? We underestimate what we can do in or we overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in
Mm,
5 years. So like, you know, you can accomplish a lot in 5 years when you look back, and you know, you can accomplish a lot in 1 year, but in sobriety and getting all of the things back, I mean, they start out, a lot of people don't have their driver's license or their birth certificates or their social security card. They haven't worked in a really long time. You know,
yeah.
the rock bottom is definitely different for everyone. And I don't even like that saying anymore, because you don't have to be
Yeah.
at rock bottom to kind of, you know, start fresh and make changes in your life. But recovery is truly about growth. And you know, that's what I've learned. And I wanted to go back to the stigma thing that you said, because I truly believe that people who are in recovery have so much growth, so
Mm,
much personal growth, more than your average, you know, person walking down the street that has never struggled with this, because they haven't had to go through reevaluating their entire life and starting from scratch, you know, and I think that the stigma on people in recovery is jaded, because they've really looked at their lives. They've really,
mm,
these people are helping other people. I love it. I feel like there's no one that has more gratitude than people in recovery.
yeah. Yeah.
And if you
Absolutely.
take the stigma away and realize that they're actually human beings that have really strived to be better, not everyone's like that. They're just not.
No. Right, right. Yeah. And it made me think about something else, and it just completely slipped my mind now, and I can't remember it.
That's
But it
okay.
had to it had to do with that, with the growth, and you know, in when you're in recovery, to not just be sober. Like I tell the people that I mentor and things too, what we want to, the goal is to be better than we were yesterday. So if you want to start with being sober, that has got to be your number one, because you will not be a better person until you get sober. And once you get sober, you start working on those things that completely broke you, and start looking deep within yourself and growing better than you were yesterday, being a totally different person, and the way you carry yourself and the things that you do, and having integrity, all of that, comes from working on yourself. You'll stay sober, but you're also making yourself better, and growing into such an amazing person. And so many people that I've mentored have done that. Even the ones that are still, incarcerated, they've changed from the time that I started meeting with them, and just looking at them, and hearing how they carry themselves, how they talk, and the things that they're doing. It's just incredible. And, my hope is that they carry that when they get out. And, there have been a couple that did not, but, there were some that have, and I still keep in contact with them. And they're like the most incredible people that I've met. So,
Right. I
um,
know, I
you know,
agree. And also I feel like as human beings, our purpose isn't to just be a consumer. Our
yeah,
purpose is to help other human beings. And in the recovery community, that's happening all the time.
right.
In the grief community, that's happening. When you have to, when you can connect with someone on a level of going through the experience that they went through, whether it, traumatic, or not. I mean, trauma is based on the individual. Honestly, you have somebody that might be going through something that might not seem as hard to you as what you went through, but it's traumatic to them.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And that was the whole thing too. Like in meetings, when people would when people share, you hear their story, and it's like, wow, that's a horrible story. Mine doesn't sound like that. So maybe I'm not that bad, or maybe I'm not going to share because my story isn't that bad. It was traumatic for me, but is that person going to say, well, you didn't go through what I went through, so your story doesn't matter as much as mine does. You know what I mean? That kind of
Right.
thing. And I remember it hit me that way too. I wouldn't share, if I felt my story wasn't as bad, which sounds weird. If my story wasn't as bad as that person who just shared out loud, like
Right.
mine is not worthy of, recovery, or being told out loud, kind of thing. And I think that's
Right.
completely incorrect. And I'm glad you said that, because everybody's story is important, no matter how big or how small. You don't have to have the worst story, just has to be worst for you, you know?
Right. And what is the saying? When has your life become unmanageable?
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that it's the same unmanageable ability or whatever as someone else, but when yours becomes unmanageable for you is when you
Right.
realize that, there's a problem when you're not functioning to a level that, we to be able to exist in this community, then you have a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Such great stuff. And I love the conversation that we can have. And, you know, going back to with, what rage does, and things like that. And you've built, such a meaningful presence, being the founder of such an awesome organization,
Oh, thank you.
meaningful organization, definitely. Showing up at events and fundraisers, and, hosting them as well. Hosting Rage Talk on Conversations with Rich Bennett, who is a great advocate as well. Writing books that really touch people's hearts, like, the 12 Days of Christmas Without My Loved One Here with Me.
Okay. Did
Yeah,
you read
definitely.
that?
I did not read it yet. No, I
Okay.
did not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I think that in a lot of ways, and I say this all the time. I said,
Hmm.
I'm not in recovery, so I'm not pretending that I am. It, but I'm recovering in other ways, like grief,
Yeah.
going through that process for myself and being around people because my daughter never got to a place of recovery. So I never saw that. So being with these women and people who have recovered, um, it really means a lot to me because if if it didn't happen, and just think of how terrible this world would be, that
Mm.
we can know that it is possible. And I've seen it happen. And they are the most amazing people. They really, truly are. And in a lot of ways, it has helped heal me. I mean, I'm still going to always have a hole in my heart, but it's also a place of like purpose. And it's changed me. They've changed me, these women
Yeah.
that have come through our house. Like truly, I learn from them all the time. I just think they're amazing. And like you said, not everyone's going to get it the first time. Someone might meet with you and then they say, no, I'm not doing this, and you don't hear from them again. Just like we had a couple ladies leave just recently, and it is heartbreaking, but a lot of times they'll come back, and
Mm.
we open the door, and that's when they're ready.
Yeah. Definitely. And, just going back to that, you know, you're not in recovery, which and you're still able to do this and still able to have compassion for those in recovery. I think it's huge. Because you're not physically in it, but you were basically physically in it, in the addiction. And with rage and things like that, what kind of keeps you motivated, and showing up the way you do, because you're not technically in recovery. So, but what helps you stay motivated to keep showing up?
Well, I feel like, we've built this, and there's
Hmm.
evidence that it's helping people. And because of that, like, why would you stop? Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying? So, it's become my full-time job, and there's a passion there just in helping people. And also, it's really rewarding to see and be able to help people. Like we had a fundraiser last 2 days ago, and
Hmm.
that the money that we raise for that is to support our Christmas kids that have been affected by addiction in some way, which means their parents could be incarcerated, they could have lost parents, their parents might not even just be around, they might be living with extended family. Like there's all kinds of reasons. In the first year back in like 2014, our first time we did the Christmas kids, we had one kid. We had one
Mm.
kid. And now, like, I mean, we hover around 15 to 20 in the community, and those kids are, they could be anything, anywhere from the children who are from the women in our houses to someone in our community that had lost a parent to other community partner that refers from drug court or stuff like that. So it is very rewarding. And what we do is we just don't collect toys. We have the fundraisers to raise funds so we can buy each child something that they want, need to wear and read. And we feel
Mm.
like that's a pretty like well-rounded little gift package to give somebody, something that you want, something that you need, something to wear, and something to
Yeah.
read. And we've been doing that now for, since 2014. So it's, over 10 years. And it's really rewarding because we have the fundraiser, we raise the funds, we figure out how much we can spend on each kid, which is typically about $100. $100 doesn't get what it used to get, but it still
Right.
gets those things. And we shop at Target just because it's local and it's convenient, and it has a large variety of stuff. And then we give it to the families, and they wrap it, and they can give back. And some of these women in our houses have not been able to buy things for their kids for a really long time. Or if
Wow.
there's an extended family member that's taking care of a child, they might not have the resources to to do all the things that they want because they're taking in someone else's child, and that's hard too.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really really awesome too. Especially, and being a kid, they don't know. So like they don't know what they're experiencing, and they're all these things are so new, and then they get, they may have never gotten anything, and then that time they do, and it's like, being a kid is so exciting for them, and they
It's
haven't
exciting
been
for
able
the,
to.
I think for the ladies in our houses, like, we hand them, here's a big bag of
Yeah.
stuff that you told us that your child needed. And sometimes they don't even know what their kid needs because they're living with, their mother or their grandparent or whoever. So, they get to like start like getting back into their lives. Like, what size shoes do they wear? They need some boots. So they'll reach out and, we'll get those, and they're able to provide those basic needs. That's why I like the want, need, wear, and read rather than
Mm,
just collecting toys and like hoping it fits the family. Cause
right.
it just it feels more personal.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. And I love that. And kids, because they're so innocent, taking care of the kids is so important. So I love that so much. And, you so with this, with how can listeners or anybody else, keep or not keep, but help out the community, or support the work that you're doing, basically, and really supporting the work that you guys are doing. What is something that listeners can, how can they do that?
Well, I would say, you can always donate. Donate to the
Mm,
organization that touches your heart. Usually we connect with something that relates to us. So if it's something to do with addiction, I would pick an organization that kind of does whatever. If you have a mother, sober living for women might touch your heart. If you are, gosh, have children, we do stuff for kids throughout the year as well. We used to have a program for called Rage Club that we did to provide activities for children, but there's other resources now, like there's treatment centers like Ashley that has the clubhouse and stuff like that. So we'll refer them to that as well. But I hate to say this, but money,
mm,
donations are really what help, because you know people think, oh, organizations get grants and they have fundraisers, why should I donate? Because it takes a lot to run it, and people need to understand that we keep the lights on, we have a water bill, the ladies have Wi-Fi, they we provide all of the cleaning supplies to the houses. So, I mean, there's a lot of overhead. So, just the dollar really does help. If you can become a monthly donor, that's even better. We have one donor who she donates $5 every month. It comes into our bank account. And believe it, she's been doing it for so long, it adds up. So, we have
yeah.
$25 donor, $10 donor, that kind of stuff. I really helps. So, you have your big fundraisers and you have your grants that help with specific things. But the general contributions from donors is really important to a nonprofit, whichever one you decide to support. If you can, sometimes we waste more than $5 in a month on, carry out or food. I'm kind of going out there right now because we waste money all the time.
Yeah.
So just giving back $5 to $10 a month to a nonprofit that you connect with means a lot to them.
I love that. I love that. Definitely, let's support any way that we can. I totally am for that. And before we get out of here, what is what's one message that you would want to leave for someone who's listening? They may be struggling or feels like there's no hope. What is one message you would like to leave them with?
Well, I've witnessed it. Recovery is possible. And, you know, you just have to take the steps to do it. You just have to take the recommendations that are given to you, and it'll get easier when you follow through. It's not going to be
Mhm.
easy every day. There's a lot of emotions. There's things, we have anxiety, we have depression, we have all of these things that are attached to this disease. There's trauma that people have to look at, and it feels overwhelming. It truly does. But if you stick with it, it'll get better.
Totally agree. I can't. That was perfectly said. I 100% agree with that. And so much. Thank you so
Oh, you're
much.
welcome. Thank you.
And yeah, absolutely. And so before we go to where can people reach out to Rage or follow on Instagram or social media, things like that?
Yeah, we have Facebook and we have an Instagram, Rage Against Addiction. You can just search us that way, www.rageagainstaddiction.org, and you can donate through the website. We have local events, so everything is on our website. I would say that's our one-stop shop to figure out and find where you can connect with us and find the resources that you need. We also do have some recovery companion workbooks. They're like coloring books. They're not like real intense. Something that if you just in early recovery and you want to sit with yourself and just get started and learn to love yourself again, you can buy them on Amazon. We also have a grief journal and the 12 Days of Christmas book that you mentioned. So, and you can find out all that information on our website. And I think that that's another way, just by supporting us. The books are not that much money. You can order them through Amazon. They're delivered right to your house, and you can kind of get a better understanding of just, who Rage is and what we're trying to do for the community.
Awesome. Awesome. And thank you so much, Wendy,
You're
for
welcome.
being so vulnerable, opening up, and letting us know, the things that you are doing, and you're so compassionate with that. And I love the fact that, we can have this conversation. I value your friendship, and just thank you so much for taking the time to come on here.
Yeah.
And
Anytime,
yeah,
anytime. Yeah.
awesome.
And you know where I am. I'm here if you need anything. And I love to be able to talk about it because, like I said, it is my passion as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, and you have an awesome day.
You too.